enhanced to ensure an effective human rights-based criminal justice response. Human rights-based criminal justice, Mr. Speaker, sir, to drug problems and focus more on harm reduction rather than on punishment. Je voudrais bien, ici, Monsieur le Président, me référer à la clause 3A, section 59A de ce projet de loi, the non-prosecution and rehabilitation of drug users, la partie ayant trait à la mise sur pied du Drug Users Administrative Panel, and this is indeed highly relevant and of paramount importance, Mr. Speaker, sir. Sujet non seulement intéressant et à propos, mais également primordial. The DUAP, as we have stated it earlier, may direct the user to undergo rehabilitation, education, counseling, treatment, aftercare, social reintegration, and any other therapy. His progress will be monitored and all necessary measures will be taken to assist the drug user to overcome his addiction. Monsieur le Président, ces jeunes ont besoin de soutien, d'aide et d'encadrement. Très souvent, ils n'arrivent pas à trouver de l'emploi et ainsi ils s'engouffrent davantage dans le désespoir et dans le monde obscur de la drogue. C'est une situation vraiment navrante et non salvatrice, pour certains surtout qui ont reconnu avoir fait des erreurs de jeunesse. L'amendement est donc très bien accueilli, car il apporte deux possibilités aux jeunes. Premièrement, le traitement du jeune drogué lui permettant de se faire soigner, lui donnant la possibilité de surmonter sa dépendance avec l'aide des professionnels de la santé. Et deuxièmement, la chose intéressante, c'est que le jeune ne sera pas obligé de mettre fin soit à sa vie scolaire ou professionnelle, car si on arrive à le récupérer, la réinsertion sera possible et il pourra mener une vie normale. Monsieur le Président, très souvent, les jeunes qui se font attraper disent qu'ils ont commencé à prendre de la drogue par curiosité, ou for fun, ou bien encore pour le showboating auprès de leurs camarades. L'amendement apporté leur évitera dans leur cas la prosécution, ou encore la prison, et permettra leur réhabilitation et réinsertion. Monsieur le Président, c'est pour cela que je pense que ce projet de loi est rempli de compassion. Monsieur le Président, je ne saurais compléter ce volet de mon intervention sans que je m'attarde brièvement sur l'aspect éducatif de la chose. In effect, such an important issue demands that we focus also on preventive means. Our attention should accordingly not be deflected from devoting resources to sustain our prevention efforts. Mr. Speaker, sir, the House will recall that the National Drug Control Master Plan 2019-2023 has as strategic objective 2.2 the following: to enhance, in line with the national and international standards, the quality, availability, and accessibility of drug use prevention programs in all educational, primary, secondary, and tertiary, and vocational institutions, with a view to empowering students with drug resilience skills. It is in accordance with this principle that in the education sector we have adopted a drug prevention policy and a vision of zero tolerance so as to have learners imbued with drug resilience skills and accordingly drug-free schools, Mr. Speaker, sir. Our strategy focuses on a three-pronged action pertaining to prevention, education, and sensitization. My ministry, as a member of the National Drug Observatory, set up with a view to monitoring and assessing the drug situation, is devising the appropriate strategies to deal effectively with the problem of drug abuse. We are doing precisely that in a number of ways. Inclusion of a range of concepts related to drug use prevention in subjects taught at school, the mounting of an avant-gardist educational program known as the Get Connected for grade 8 students that aim to delay to delay tobacco and alcohol initiation among adolescents, itself an entry route into the world of drugs. We also have now the Rebound program, a drug use prevention program for grade 10 students. It supports young people in reflective decision-making. This includes developing critical attitudes towards peer beliefs, media models, as well as risk competence regarding alcohol and other drugs. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me just mention that from 2015 to 2022, a total of 2,253 sensitization sessions have been carried out in active collaboration with a number of local and international agencies, especially the Ministry of Health and the Police Department. On the other hand, Mr. Speaker, sir, the National Educational Counseling Service of my ministry has set up counseling desks, student care and counseling desks in our schools. And we all know that a well-balanced mind is always well-armed to tackle drug cravings. Mr. Speaker, sir, we're helping our children. The second amendment I wish to comment upon relates to the legalization of medical cannabis. Without going into the technicalities of the subject, it is understood that medical cannabis is extremely effective in pain management, in the treatment of multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, terminal cases of diseases that cannot be treated, and for people undergoing chemotherapy. And I'm glad to note that provision has also been made to include other therapeutic conditions as may be authorized by the technical committee. Mr. Speaker, sir, the bottom line is that the medicinal use of cannabis applies specifically to patients whose clinical needs cannot be met by conventional medicine, where recourse is resorted to it only when established treatment options have all failed. It is used, as I've said earlier, for terminally ill patients who have exhausted all other medical options. Most countries in the world, Mr. Speaker, sir, that have shown results, that have legalized medicinal use of cannabis, have shown that the results are highly progressive and positive. This explains why medical cannabis is evolving, the use is evolving, and global demand for medicinal cannabis continues to increase, as proved by more than 50 countries that have legalized it. Mr. Speaker, sir, as stated before by others, the closer to us in time, there has been the landmark decision of the World Health Organization to remove cannabis and resin from the Schedule 4 of the 1961 UN Single Convention on Narcotics Drugs. It is ceased to be regarded as having particularly dangerous properties. But, side by side, it was also agreed that cannabis does have therapeutic value, but it is still regarded as highly addictive and liable to abuse. Just a byword, Mr. Speaker, sir. We are speaking exclusively here of medicinal cannabis and not recreative cannabis. In the wake of the recommendations of the United Nations Commission on Narcotic Drugs, as well as those formulated by the local Commission on the Inquiry of Drug Trafficking set up in 2015, government through the Ministry of Health had set up the Technical Committee on Medicinal Cannabis under the chairpersonship of the Executive Director of the MRIC. What is important to highlight is that the Technical Committee has examined all the aspects related to the use of cannabis for medical purposes, including the therapeutic and legal implications. Interestingly, Mr. Speaker, sir, but not surprisingly, a significant number of positive response came from both the health professionals and patients who had prior treatment with cannabis-based medicinal products overseas. I believe, Mr. Speaker, sir, that enough ground has been covered for us to now converge towards accepting the mainstreaming of medicinal cannabis. But we still need safeguards. Certainly, this bill is not opening doors for wide range, for large-scale utilization or even abuse of medicinal cannabis. The bill accordingly makes adequate provisions for the setting up of relevant safeguards. I refer to some of these, Mr. Speaker, sir. Clause 28C of Part 2A, the bill makes provision for the setting up in every regional hospital of the Medicinal Cannabis Therapeutic Committee, chaired by the Regional Health Director, two government-authorized specialists, and authorized pharmacists as member, and they also include social workers whenever required. It is this committee that shall exclusively determine, at the specific request of authorized specialists, whether a patient should be provided treatment with medicinal cannabis or not. Clause 28D specifies no person other than the authorized specialist shall make such a request. Another safeguard, Mr. Speaker, is at clause 28b that makes it unlawful for any person to use or import medical cannabis unless he is so authorized. And also, Mr. Speaker, the prescription will be time-bound with a renewable period not exceeding 3 months, as indicated by clause 28f. Mr. Speaker, there is another dimension to this bill that I view as well deserving of consideration of my colleague and his team, and they have given consideration to it. At clause 28a, subsection A, both the authorized pharmacists and the authorized specialists are expected to have successfully completed a training course, as approved by the Ministry, on the handling and dispensing of the therapeutic use of medicinal cannabis, respectively. It's quite proper and vital. Internationally, those regimes that have legalized medicinal cannabis have had to provide such training to develop the right attitudes, stoke up dispensers' self-confidence, bolster their knowledge, and ensure patient safety with respect to medical cannabis use. As we can see, Mr. Speaker, this whole process has been well thought through, including the holding of a register of medicinal cannabis and where it can be dispensed and the conditionalities for its import. Qu'on se rassure, le tout sera fait sous les conditions strictes au niveau de l'importation, tout comme la distribution. There is nothing aleatory about it, but there is need to tread cautiously. Although we know that few countries like Malta, Canada, Uruguay, and many others have legalized the commercialization of recreative cannabis, since, according to them, a repressive policy has yielded no results, we also know that certain governments have agreed to come with new legislation to decriminalize recreative cannabis. Among other reasons that they put forward is that the police department and legal services should concentrate on other important matters. But I believe, Mr. Speaker, that we cannot at this stage take any further risk. Mr. Speaker, unless I'm mistaken, at one point in his intervention, the Honourable Leader of Opposition suggested that we should consider the decriminalizing and depenalizing of cannabis for recreative purposes. Or at least he stated that we should give a thought to it. I, for one, would prefer to err on the side of caution. Yes, there are a few countries that have decided to take that route for several reasons, and it appears that they have done so in the belief that repression has not been of much help in the country. But I still feel that we should tread cautiously. The jury is still out where the potential benefits are concerned. On the other hand, the arguments against recreative cannabis are potent. Dr. Hasnu highlighted many potential health risks. It is so easy, Mr. Speaker, for the youth to get tempted to try, just through curiosity. And then they get trapped. They get trapped in this sick infernal. And I am deeply worried about the havoc it can cause to our adolescents. Cannabis is potentially a risk, and the threat of addiction looms very large on the horizon. And we all know the impact addiction can have on family, social and personal life as well. It is the health and well-being of the future generations that we will be putting in jeopardy. And I'm sure that this will not rest easy with any one of us here. Mr. Speaker, I would rather say, let's take things one at a time. Let's not rush in where angels fear to tread. Mr. Speaker, I'm a bit surprised by the queer scenario that is being played here in this country. Day in, day out, we have raids undertaken, huge amounts of drugs being seized and people being detained. But what do we see and hear, Mr. Speaker, Instead of congratulating institutions like the police force for the massive scale of drug seizures, instead of recognizing the laudable efforts carried out to stem the drug tide, instead of commending the police force for their courage, some people think of nothing better than to say that the police force is out planting incriminating evidence to frame people. Monsieur le Président, c'est vraiment incroyable, irresponsable. Incroyable, Monsieur le Président. C'est comme si tout ce qui se fait n'est pas bon et qu'on donne même l'impression que nous sommes en train de pointer du doigt des institutions et on ne réalise même pas le risque, le dégât que cela peut causer. Mr. Speaker, sir, can we, for all our efforts, wake people who pretend to sleep or make people listen those who pretend to be deaf? I genuinely believe, Mr. Speaker, sir, that this whole issue about drugs is one that we need to combat together. It has to be a collective, collaborative endeavor above party politics. The fate of our children and youth is at stake here, and we should be alive to this fact. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Prime Minister has clearly shown what is the direction that he is taking and how much he cares for our children, for our youth, and how the actions that he has been taking are meant to get, for us, to get rid of this scourge. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me now once again congratulate my colleague, le ministre qui, à travers ce projet de loi, fait preuve de beaucoup de cœur, de compassion envers les jeunes victimes de ce fléau et qui auront maintenant, à travers ce projet de loi, le soutien et l'encadrement voulu qui permettra leur réhabilitation et leur réinsertion dans la société. Aujourd'hui, avec l'avènement de ce projet de loi, c'est une étape très importante pour le pays. Je suis soulagée que ces jeunes ne seront pas poursuivis, mais encadrés par les professionnels pour traiter ceux et celles qui sont victimes de la drogue. This bill before the House, Mr. Speaker, sir, demonstrates clearly how government in general and the Ministry of Health and Wellness in particular intend to take the bull by the horns. The good thing about this bill is that it has not been a holding statement with blanks filled in for quick issue. Rather, it has been a well thought through and seriously lays down the blueprint for a set of highly innovative actions. Le cannabis médical a effectivement fait des success stories dans le monde. On peut lire sur le site Internet de l'Organisation mondiale de la santé que plusieurs études ont démontré les effets thérapeutiques du cannabis médical dans les stades avancés de maladie. Et je dois ajouter que la presse locale qualifie cet amendement de très grande avancée pour le pays. Une avancée majeure et importante dans le développement scientifique, mais aussi évolutif de la race humaine. Je me permets, Monsieur le Président, de faire un constat. Je suis consciente que la majorité des membres de la Chambre ne dira pas le contraire, vu le nombre de patients qui quittent le pays pour l'étranger, pour les opérations et pour les traitements poussés. J'espère qu'avec l'avènement de ces amendements au Dangerous Drugs Act, les patients qui se font soigner ailleurs et qui ont là-bas trouvé la possibilité d'utiliser le cannabis médical pourront, une fois de retour au pays, avoir le même service. Monsieur le Président, encore une fois, je félicite le ministre et je vous remercie. Merci.
Prime Minister, you have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, sir, the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Bill comes at a very important conjuncture for my government. The House will recall that 2 years back, my government had pledged to expedite the implementation of the National Drug Control Master Plan, focusing on demand and supply reduction and rehabilitation and the treatment of drug addicts. As we have reached halfway through our mandate, we are proud to bring this landmark bill into the National Assembly, as it is the fruition of all our public discourses and of our relentless efforts to combat the scourge of drug trafficking. The bill also bears testimony to the positive results which are being brought by the mechanisms put in place by my government, such as the High-Level Drugs and HIV Council, which I chair, and the National Drug Secretariat, which coordinates with all relevant ministries and departments to ensure that the drug situation in our country is scientifically assessed and appropriate remedies are provided. Mr. Speaker, sir, the bill provides for the setting up of a Drug Users Administrative Panel, the DUAP, which aligns itself with my government's commitment to tackle the drug issue on its two main fronts, the demand and supply. While we have continuously invested in the capacities of our law enforcement agencies to curb drug trafficking, which is the supply aspect, my government, bearing in mind new norms and international best practices, is now focusing on the consumer's aspect of drugs, that is the demand aspect, by taking care and helping those concerned to rise from the hell of drug addiction. The setting up of the DUAP is in line with Resolution 64/3 of 2021 of the United Nations Commission on Narcotic Drugs, which in fact reaffirmed the importance of promoting appropriate mechanisms for ensuring compliance, quality assurance or accreditation of drug treatment services, such as effective oversight of drug treatment and rehabilitation facilities by competent domestic authorities, and the supervision by appropriately trained and qualified professionals. These aim to ensure the adequate quality of drug treatment, ensure sustained recovery and related support and rehabilitation services, and promote continuous improvement and prevent any possible acts of cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or punishment in accordance with domestic legislation and applicable international law. In 2020, the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health, in a statement at the intercession meeting of the 63rd United Nations Commission of Narcotic Drugs, highlighted that, and I quote, "Overly punitive approaches and the criminalization of drug use fuel stigmatizing attitudes and discrimination. They also pose significant obstacles for the realization of the right to health of people who use drugs. Criminalization drives people who use drugs away from the health care they need, out of fear of arrest, imprisonment, or non-consensual treatment. There are ever-growing evidence that harm reduction measures, such as needle exchange program, quality treatment, education, counseling, and drug substitutes like methadone have been effective in decreasing addiction, overdose, and the spread of HIV and hepatitis C," unquote. Mr. Speaker, sir, the setting up of the DUAP is the culmination of nearly 4 years of consultations and discussions. In 2018, it formed part of the 390 recommendations made by the Commission of Inquiry on Drug Trafficking. Back then, the Commission of Inquiry had pointed out that such a panel will help divert drug users, whether they are first-timers or occasional drug consumers, away from the criminal justice system. Instead, they would be directed to appropriate treatment and rehabilitation, which ultimately would help in their reintegration in the society as drug-free individuals. The establishment of the DUAP was also thoroughly canvassed during the High-Level Drugs and HIV Council held in September 2020. And the latter council had recommended that a technical committee be instituted under the chair of the Attorney General, to examine the proposal for the setting up of the DUAP, its legal implications, as well as its impact on social and health services. In September 2021, the Council was apprised of the recommendations of the Technical Committee, and eventually these were favorably considered. My government agreed to these recommendations in January 2022, and the Ministry of Health and Wellness, being the custodian of the Dangerous Drugs Act, was entrusted with the responsibility to come up with the appropriate amendments and to drive this project. Promises made and promises fulfilled. My government is yet again proving the doubters, the skeptics, and the usual oiseaux de mauvais augure wrong. En effet, Monsieur le Président, les réalisations et les défis relevés avec brio par mon gouvernement terrassent les membres de l'opposition, à tel point qu'ils s'exaspèrent dans leur confusion et désunion. What they are unaware of, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that I mean business and my government means business. And quite evidently, among the 390 recommendations made by the Commission of Inquiry on Drug Trafficking, 279 have already been implemented, while actions have already been initiated for 64 recommendations. This represents a little more than 85% in terms of implementing the recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry on Drug Trafficking. Mr. Speaker, sir, the DUAP is a lifeline being extended to drug users and their families. It is a second chance to those individuals who fell into the vicious circle and trap of drug consumption. For years, drug users have been penalized as their criminal records were tainted and they faced discrimination when it came to employment opportunities. We have to evolve, as is the case elsewhere. I said before, when questioned on this matter, that I was open-minded and prepared to consider a new stance with regard to drug users, and also the use of medicinal cannabis for therapeutic use. My government is demonstrating its ability to adopt policy changes when it comes to safeguard the interests of our people. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is now being widely acknowledged that law enforcement agencies should focus their resources on bringing to justice those who profit from the drug trade instead of the victims who should rather be offered public health care and social assistance. The amendments provide for the Commissioner of Police to make a recommendation to the Director of Public Prosecutions for a drug user to undergo rehabilitation in lieu of being prosecuted. Our law enforcement agencies would therefore be like the two yet indissociable sides of the same coin, the hammer for the drug traffickers and the sucker to the drug users. The DUAP will be mandated to direct the user to undergo rehabilitation and also monitor his progress in the rehabilitation program. Prior to that, the panel will follow a series of steps to assess the drug user and to evaluate his willingness to follow treatment. Only then will the drug user be directed to the appropriate treatment facilities. The addiction units within our healthcare system, together with other specialized health centers, as well as NGOs, which provides support services to drug users, will be responsible for the medical and psychosocial treatments of people referred through the DUAP. Mr. Speaker, sir, the DUAP will also promote inclusiveness, and this will be reflected by the composition of the panel. The chairperson of the panel will be a retired judge of the Supreme Court. The vice chairperson will be a barrister having not less than 10 years standing. And other members will comprise 2 retired government medical officers with proven experience in the field of drug dependence and 2 social workers having the necessary experience in the field of drug dependence. The drug problem requires a multi-sectoral approach, and the presence of social workers in the panel would ensure that the right support and assistance is provided to the drug user willing to change his life for the better. Civil society has an important role to play in this fight, and it is more than ever required to have its representatives partaking decisions when it comes to the lives of individuals. Mr. Speaker, sir, the setting up of the DUAP is in line with our modern policy of a more humane approach for the management of drug users through a well-structured system of treatment and rehabilitation rather than being drugged within the criminal justice system and further exacerbating the drug problem that the individual might have. But punishing people for drug use reinforces a stigma, which is in itself a major hindrance towards treatment and recovery. People living with active drug use disorders due to the stigma, often linked to their past arrests or incarceration records, tend to stay far from the only rightful option, which is treatment and rehabilitation. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are embarking on a monumental task, and we believe that victims of drug trafficking need redress rather than duress. I care, and we care as a compassionate government for the well-being of all our citizens, irrespective of their health situation. Mr. Speaker, sir, alongside the idea of a caring government for victims, my government will continue to be ruthless towards drug traffickers. The sheer amount and street value of drug seizures since 2015 is a statement in itself. Indeed, drugs worth more than 14 billion rupees have been seized. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition has canvassed the idea of an assise de la toxicomanie. I do not think that is necessary, as the high-level Drugs and HIV Council, which comprises representatives of relevant ministries and departments, the NGOs, the civil society organizations, and the private sector, is already in place and working together to come up with policies and strategies against the drug scourge. And since the setting up of the Council, 5 meetings have been held under my chair. Moreover, the National Drug Control Master Plan 2019-2023 defines the policies for drug control for the 5 years 2019 to 2023. The master plan rests under the 4 strategic pillars as follows. 1, the drug supply reduction. 2, drug demand reduction, namely drug use prevention, drug use disorders, treatment, rehabilitation, and social reintegration. 3, the harm reduction. And 4, coordination mechanism legislation implementation framework, monitoring and evaluation, and strategic information. The National Drug Control Master Plan 2019-2023 would be duly evaluated in 2023. Extensive consultation would be conducted in view of the preparation of the next National Drug Control Master Plan. And all members of the National Assembly, religious leaders, and community leaders would be invited to submit their concerns and recommendations. It is to be highlighted that the 4 committees set up under the National Drug Secretariat include different partners involved in the fight against drugs. These committees are the Drug Prevention Committee, the Harm Reduction Committee, the Treatment and Rehabilitation Committee, and the Supply Reduction Committee. Mr. Speaker, sir, above all, members of the public and all entities concerned by the drug scourge were given the opportunity to depose before the Commission of Inquiry on Drug Trafficking. Hearings started on the 4th of November 2015 and were completed on 14th of March 2018. There had been 318 sittings and 306 persons were heard. That is ample testimony to the extensive hearing and interaction there have been on the drug scourge. Therefore, that is another reason why the organization of an assise de la toxicomanie is not justified. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me refer to questions raised by Honorable Utim and Honorable Juman, who asked about the protocol and the time frame to refer a case to the DPP. In fact, a protocol will be worked out by the Office of the DPP and the police with a view to establishing the necessary procedures and processes in order to ensure a reasonable time frame for referral of cases to the DUAP. A question has also been raised whether tourists or foreigners would be referred to the DUAP. That will not be the case, as for such tourist or foreigner, the normal procedures and processes would follow. As regards to the question raised by Honorable Tim regarding the procedure for appeal to the panel, it does not arise. The DPP has the discretion to refer a case to the DUAP. A question has also been raised on what happens if the drug user is arrested again for drug consumption, pending the first case being referred to the DPP. Logically, the case would be referred again to the DPP. And as regards to the proposal of Honorable Lobin to replace the word may by the word shall in section 59, subsection B2 of the Dangerous Drugs Act, that cannot be entertained, Mr. Speaker, sir, as the DPP acts on its own deliberate judgment. As regards cases involving minors below 14 years, the House is informed that minors below 14 years are not arrested for drug consumption. For minors aged 14 to below 18 years, they are referred to rehabilitation subject to a notification report from the probation office. And regarding concerns raised in relation to their certificate of character, I must emphasize that the setting up of the DUAP, drug users will be diverted from the criminal justice system. Thus, it will have no effect on the certificate of character, as has been mentioned by the Attorney General in his speech. Monsieur le Président, alors, l'honorable Arvin Boulel s'est encore permis durant son intervention d'essayer de vilipender des membres du MSM, qu'il accuse d'être connectés au baron de la drogue. Tel Goebbels, du temps des nazis, il tente, comme d'autres au sein de l'opposition parlementaire et extra-parlementaire, d'intoxiquer la population à travers une campagne de fausse propagande. Mais le peuple n'est pas dupe, Monsieur le Président, car ce peuple a vécu les frasques odieuses du Parti travailliste et du PMSD au pouvoir. Leur connexion avec la mafia, pas seulement la mafia de la drogue, mais aussi la mafia des jeux, dont les activités illicites ont cru monstrueusement entre 2005 et 2014. La vérité, je l'ai dit, Monsieur le Président, cette mafia finance encore certains partis de l'opposition et groupuscules extra-parlementaires. Tous travaillent de concert pour essayer de déstabiliser le gouvernement, qui nuit à leurs intérêts communs. Certaines questions parlementaires et des prises de position des honorables tels que l'honorable Boulel et l'honorable Bagouane, entre autres, sur les courses hippiques par exemple, prouvent à quel point certaines proximités dictent leurs actions. On comprend mieux aujourd'hui pourquoi le Parti travailliste et le PMSD au pouvoir n'ont jamais voulu instituer une commission d'enquête sur la drogue. Monsieur le Président, imaginez, de 2005 à 2014, je ne vais pas me référer aux plusieurs questions qui ont été posées ici même à la Chambre, et par certains membres du MMM, donc qui aujourd'hui s'associent avec le Parti travailliste, qui demandaient, qui suppliaient le gouvernement d'alors, instituer une commission d'enquête. Et le Premier ministre d'alors qui disait simplement, there was no need to do so. Qui voulait-il protéger? La population connaît déjà la réponse. Surtout quand elle constate à quel point certains membres de l'opposition sont proches d'un certain monsieur BL, dont le symbole est, s'il vous plaît, et dont le slogan est BLD, Baron la drogue. Aujourd'hui, plus connu, d'un monsieur Akil B, d'un autre monsieur Grodé, d'un autre Achid D, et autre Cindy, femme très galante. Et récemment, je dirais merci aux leaders de l'opposition, que nous avons pu identifier un monsieur Jonathan A, monsieur Tipapier. Comme quoi nous ne savons pas que monsieur Tipapier est proche de qui. Monsieur le Président, toute la nation a vu le leader du Parti travailliste, le docteur Navin Ramgoulam, à côté de M. BL, à la place d'Armes le 29 octobre dernier, s'échangeant même un coup de poing triomphal en signe de complicité. Peut-être pour les membres qui n'ont pas vu. Voilà. And I can table, it's good at table so that they can... Yeah. I will table this photo. Ce même Navin Ramgoulam avait donné le mot d'ordre à ses partisans d'être présents à cette manifestation. L'honorable Arvin Boulel, l'honorable Patrick Assievaden, Ritesh Ramphol, Eshan Juman, Lomesh Bandou, Souren Dayal, l'honorable Stéphanie Anctil et d'autres dirigeants ont donc accompagné leur leader pour rafraîchir leur mémoire. Ça, c'est extraordinaire, l'honorable Boulel. Vous avez fait des commentaires sarcastiques à l'égard d'un collègue en l'appelant savate dodo. Je ne sais pas de quelle savate vous êtes en train de côté. Hein? Je vous envoie. Let me table. Let me table. Cette photo, celle-là, c'est encore plus éloquent pour Stéphanie Anctil, l'honorable Stéphanie Anctil. Ce n'est pas seulement une proximité. Je vais rien conclure de ce que je vois sur la photo. Allez. Peut-être l'honorable Eshan Juman voudrait jeter un coup d'œil sur les photos.
Honorable Juman,
Ucham tabling.
debate going on.
Donc, Monsieur le Président, celui-là même qui a été arrêté le 4 novembre suite à la découverte de 46 kilos d'hachiche d'une valeur marchande de 230 millions dans sa BMW immatriculée JR12, ainsi que des armes à feu et de la drogue synthétique dans sa maison. Donc, et tout de suite après, qu'est-ce qu'on a vu? Le docteur Ramgoulam, qui a vite réagi pour défendre son poulain en parlant d'arrestation arbitraire. Mais le peuple aura vite compris la proximité, cette proximité flagrante. Et dans le cas de l'arrestation d'un monsieur Akil B pour possession de drogue synthétique, alors que tout le monde, à travers des images vidéo, a vu l'homme de loi et membre du Parti travailliste, s'il vous plaît, proche collaborateur du docteur Navin Ramgoulam, s'empressant à se débarrasser d'un sac suspect, le docteur Navin Ramgoulam a trouvé que Maurice devient Haïti, hein, à l'époque de Papadoc. Et je cite, « Quand tu peux servir un tonton macoute de la police pour faire répression ?» On verra. Time will tell, Mr. Speaker, sir. Tous ces commentaires, comment on est en train de défendre ceux qui, valeur du jour, ils sont des suspects. On verra lorsqu'ils seront traduits devant une cour de justice et finalement, quel sera le verdict. Le leader du Parti travailliste défendait ainsi un de ses membres, sans même connaître les dessous de l'affaire. Et son, comment dois-je l'appeler, son field operator, field scavenger, I don't know what post you hold. Hein? Le sous-fifre doté, le docteur Arvin Boulel qui n'a pas marché, qui n'a pas cherché mieux pour parler lui aussi, hein? Il n'a pas mâché ses mots. Et il est venu lui aussi accuser le gouvernement et m'accuser personnellement que je suis un autre papadoc avec les tontons macoutes. La population est en train d'écouter, de voir et va éventuellement juger. Maintenant, Monsieur le Président, il est bon de savoir qui sont les avocats qui défendent BL. Donc là, il s'agit de l'honorable. Il n'est pas présent à l'Assemblée. Peut-être qu'il est en train de défendre le monsieur. Il s'agit de l'honorable Shakil Mohamed, membre du front bench du Parti travailliste. Et aussi l'avocat Nilkant Dalou, membre de l'exécutif du Parti travailliste. Monsieur le Président, concernant le monsieur monsieur Tipapier, donc je vais aussi déposer devant la Chambre une photo qui démontre la proximité de monsieur Tipapier avec le leader du Parti travailliste. Celui-là, oui, c'est un grand papier, which I table. C'est dire, Monsieur le Président, que le Parti travail s'est trempé jusqu'aux os avec la mafia de la drogue.
May I have the mic? Thank you. these photos, are you accepting them to be tabled like that? Where do they come from? Who has taken them? Before, you have always asked for photos to be authenticated, taken by me, such and such date. That was your previous ruling. Well, now you have changed your ruling? Is that the case? Will we now be allowed to submit photos?
No. Let me, Honorable Leader of the Opposition, let me give my ruling. Yes, you said you have documents, you have proof, you have all these. He is saying what appeared in the press, and he's not tabling it to the clerk. He is just showing it from his place, as you are used to do, and many others have been doing that for years now. I'm not shouting. I am causing you to understand the truth. Yes, you lose points. This is why you shut up. Prime Minister, continue. You shut up.
Mr. Speaker, let me just comment that there is a difference between a photograph and anything that is written, of which the content must be authenticated and proved. There is, you have a council, you have two councils there. The photograph is, you mean this is not Dr. Rangulam then? Okay. This is, if that photograph is not Dr. Rangulam, I won't table it.
But of course,
okay?
Leader of the
I won't
Opposition.
table it.
Of course, Leader of the Opposition. This is the truth.
A copy of a press article, and you turned it down.
No, this is different.
What do you mean? Why did you turn down a copy of a press article? Now you're accepting a photo.
Why to see the difference? The Prime Minister, order. The Prime Minister said, I can table it. But he didn't table it. If you table it, you have to go through the clerk or the deputy clerk. And many times, many members, learn it. Many members from the opposition just brandish papers like this and say, oh, we have this, we have this. And okay, you continue, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, sir, just to calm down the opposition, if this is not the photograph of Dr. Rangulam, I will not table it. We'll keep it for outside, out there, as Honorable Boulel used to say. Then we'll see whether people will. Then we'll see whether people will identify Dr. Rangulam with Mr. Tipapier. Donc, Monsieur le Président, c'est dire, comme je disais, le Parti travailliste est trempé jusqu'aux os avec la mafia de la drogue. Et c'est la raison pour laquelle le Parti travailliste...
Order! Order! You don't discuss with the chair. Order! Continue, please.
C'est la raison pour laquelle le Parti travailliste n'a jamais voulu instituer une commission d'enquête sur la drogue. Faut-il aussi être un sorcier, Monsieur le Président, pour comprendre pourquoi certains membres de l'opposition ont défendu bec et ongles dans cette chambre un trafiquant de drogue, un criminel qui a été condamné en Slovaquie pour fabrication, possession et trafic de drogue. La population a pu constater comment ces membres de l'opposition, incluant l'honorable Outim qui souvent agissent en donneurs de leçons, se sont mis dans le camp d'un marchand de la mort. Ils ont soutenu un homme dangereux qui voulait contracter un mariage de convenance avec une Mauricienne pour se réfugier dans notre pays et faire son odieux business et mettre en péril la vie de nos enfants. Ces membres de l'opposition se sont rangés du côté de la mafia de la drogue. Leur masque continue de tomber. Monsieur le Président, et il ose nous accuser. Cette opposition est indigne. Le peuple saura, j'en suis convaincu, juger ces membres de l'opposition en temps et lieu. Et contrairement à la propagande de Goebbels, de l'opposition, le MSM au gouvernement a institué 2 commissions d'enquête sur la drogue et a agi courageusement pour implémenter leurs recommandations. Feu Sanirou Jagnat, ancien Premier ministre, n'avait pas hésité à mettre sa vie en danger pour combattre la mafia de la drogue. C'est un combat que je poursuis avec autant de détermination et de courage. Le peuple peut le constater. La quantité de drogue saisie depuis 2015 d'une valeur marchande supérieure à 14 milliards de roupies, comme j'ai mentionné plus tôt, en est la preuve. Et nous allons continuer à traquer ces marchands de la drogue, ces marchands de la mort et toute autre mafia qui nuisent à nos compatriotes et à notre pays. Aucun complot, aucune fausse propagande, aucune menace ne va m'arrêter dans ce combat. La police a tout mon soutien pour mener à bien leurs actions sur le terrain et à traduire les inculpés devant la justice. There will be no retreat, no surrender, Mr. Speaker, sir. As I said, my government is leaving no stone unturned in the combat against drug trafficking. Legislative amendments would thus provide the necessary impetus to our law enforcement agencies to effectively cut down the progression of drug trafficking. For example, Clause 12 of the bill provides for the introduction of Section 39A in the Dangerous Drugs Act, which will serve as a stronger deterrence to anyone who might be inclined to help drug traffickers. Clause 15 of the bill would empower police officers, not below the rank of Superintendent of Police, to recommend a government medical officer to carry out a medical examination, including X-ray of a person who is reasonably suspected of having concealed any dangerous drug inside his body. The process of contacting a magistrate, especially during the night and public holidays, is particularly cumbersome and delays may risk the life of a suspect. This new section in the Dangerous Drugs Act will reduce the associated health risk of the suspect who may have, for instance, swallowed pellets of drugs. There will also be a minor yet very important addition to Section 41 of the Dangerous Drugs Act, which will deter drug supply within court premises. The amendment to Section 55 of the Dangerous Drugs Act is being brought due to the request from regional partners to allow the actual drugs in transit in Mauritius to reach its final destination. This will enable the establishment of a prima facie case thereat and the conduct of a controlled delivery operation. The amendment to Section 58 of the Dangerous Drugs Act to allow the destruction of the drugs seized is in line with international best practice and is due to unsustainable storage capacity of the AXU exhibit room. With increasing numbers of seizures, pressure is exerted on the storage capacity of the AXU exhibit room, which has reached, I must say, practically its saturation level. Mr. Speaker, sir, the bill is also a major milestone on the Mauritian medical scene with the introduction of a framework to regulate medicinal cannabis. Again, with this amendment, Mauritius seeks to align itself with international practices. On 2nd of December 2020, the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs reclassified cannabis and cannabis resin under an international listing that recognizes its medical value. The Commission on Narcotic Drugs voted on recommendations made by the World Health Organization's 41st Expert Committee on Drug Dependence, which suggested that cannabis and cannabis resin should be reclassified from its current listing alongside heroin, fentanyl analogues, and other opioids considered to be exceptionally harmful to public health. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I have highlighted time and again, there is an upward trend in the number of cases related to drug seizures due to the determination of my government to combat the drug scourge and the relentless hunting of drug traffickers by our law enforcement agencies. Mr. Speaker, sir, my government is also aware that every drug seizure needs to be accompanied with an authentication report issued by the Forensic Science Laboratory. More drug seizures result in more drug packages which need to be analyzed by the FSL. From 2,848 drug cases being sent to the FSL in 2009 to a whopping 4,106 drug cases in 2021, the FSL is being constantly called upon to deliver amidst changing dynamics, whilst its process to analyze drugs has remained a very tedious and time-consuming one. For example, when a drug case of 30 kilograms heroin is referred to the FSL, the exhibit officer will be requested to bring the exhibit to the FSL. And thereafter, the steps followed by the FSL will be as follows. Identify the number of packages in the exhibit, record the gross weight of the exhibit. The packages will then undergo a thorough screening of contact DNA. The packages will then be handed over to the drugs unit. The packages will be opened. The substances and wrappings will be weighed separately. A sample from each package will be taken for analysis purpose, and the residual substance with packaging will be handed back to the exhibit officer. The samples taken will then be analyzed by the FSL officers through various forensic methods and using the available equipment, and depending on the method used, equipment may produce results within a few minutes or within few days. The number of cases for drugs above street value of 100,000 rupees still requiring analysis by the FSL since 2018 stand at 303, while the number of cases for drugs below street value of 100,000 rupees awaiting FSL analysis is 2,208. The accumulating number of drug cases being referred to the FSL and the current inability of the FSL to effectively respond to these pressing and urgent cases within a reasonable time frame is contributing in delayed court proceedings, thereby clogging the justice system. My government is very much aware of the need to fast-track cases related to drug seizures, and I would here wish to commend the efforts undertaken by the FSL to provide some remedy to that situation. In the light of the recommendations made by the Commission of Inquiry on Drug Trafficking, in addition to the chemistry and biology units, a fully serviced and dedicated drugs unit was established in September 2021. The drugs unit is currently staffed with 15 qualified officers who are technical signatories of drug analysis by Mauritius and who have demonstrated an aptitude in carrying out drug analysis. The drugs unit is also endowed with state-of-the-art equipment, which is consistent with my government's strategy to invest in the right tools, contributing in the fight against drug trafficking. The purchase value of the instrument pool of the FSL solely dedicated to the analysis of drugs amounts to approximately 127 million rupees, which represents the investment of government in forensic drug services. In fact, during a regional workshop organized in August this year, the member states of the SADC and the Regional Bureau of the Interpol had recognized the drugs unit of the FSL as a center of excellence for drug analysis and training. Notwithstanding all this investment and willingness to fast-track the analysis of drug cases, the fact still remains that the FSL would still have a backlog of drug cases waiting for analysis. This would even be the case if the staff work non-stop 24/7 for 250 days, and if the equipment are allowed to perform in the same way, which is practically impossible. Mr. Speaker, sir, the amendment to Section 58 of the Dangerous Drugs Act comes at an opportune time, in view of the weekly drug seizures occurring all around the island. It will enable the setting up of a fast-track system for the speedy analysis of drug samples and issuing of the authentication report by the FSL. This amendment will allow the FSL to implement sampling protocols and procedures, which is in line with international best practices and as developed by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. The principle underlying sampling is that the composition found in the samples taken from a few packages reflects the composition of the whole lot of one drug seizure case. The sampling procedure, which will be implemented, is based on sampling methods as per the UNODC guidelines on representative drug sampling. And this amendment will cause the FSL to analyze a sample of the dangerous drugs to determine the nature, identity, and weight of the drugs, while the current cumbersome method is that FSL analyzes the several packages of the dangerous drugs case to conclude that it is evidently dangerous drugs. For example, if the FSL is called upon to analyze 100 packages of drugs, a sample of 10 packages will be weighed and analyzed. The result of analysis and weight thereof will be extrapolated to the 100 packages. This is the statistical sampling method that will be used henceforth by FSL for meeting a realistic turnaround time for drug analysis. The amendment also provides a safeguard to the accused party. Should the latter be dissatisfied with the FSL report, he may make a request to cause another sample of the substance suspected to be dangerous drug to be analyzed by an accredited science laboratory and under strict supervision, but at his own costs. The FSL is duly accredited with ISO standards for the analysis of all types of drugs encountered in Mauritius. It is worth noting that sampling methods are used in other jurisdictions also, such as South Africa and New South Wales in Australia. It is also important to highlight that even the Commission of Inquiry on Drug Trafficking had recommended that the FSL adopts and follows guidelines, directives, and protocols which are in line with the latest applicable and internationally recognized institutions. Mr. Speaker, sir, the House will recall the private notice question of 17th of June 2022, where the Honorable Leader of the Opposition made allusions to my government dragging its feet on legislative proposals to fast-track the analysis of drug cases by the FSL. And here we are, with amendments to the Dangerous Drugs Act, and to prove yet again to the Honorable Leader of the Opposition that my government means business and its resolve to fight the drug scourge remains unabated. With these words, I commend the work that has been done by different ministries, including my office and the Attorney General's office to prepare this bill. And I thank the Honorable Minister of Health and Wellness for his dedication in finalizing this bill and presenting it to the House. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are acting proactively in updating our legal tools to step up our fight against drug trafficking while giving to drug users a chance to get out of the drug trap. Once again, we are proving that we are a responsible and caring government. Thank you.
Honourable Minister, you have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I will proceed with the summing up of the Dangerous Drug Amendment Bill number 15 of 2022. I would like to thank members of Parliament from both sides of the House for having brought their insights and comments to this bill. At the very outset, Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to point out that the amendments that are being brought to the Dangerous Drugs Act are testimony of the determination of this government under the leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister Pravin Kumar Jagnnath to fight drug traffickers, to fight drug trafficking, but also tendre la main et donner la chance aux usagers de drogue de reprendre leur vie en main. Mr. Speaker, sir, this government is showing compassion towards the victims of drugs, offering them a pathway towards redemption with the introduction of the Drug Users Administrative Panel. The introduction of medicinal cannabis for therapeutic conditions is again a very significant step forward. Promises made by this government are translated into reality. Mr. Speaker, sir, before refuting the comments made by members of the House while debating on the most eagerly awaited bill, let me give an overview of addiction. Briefly, addiction is a worldwide phenomenon affecting low-income to high-income countries, East and West societies, conservative and liberal nations, and is of concern from international authorities to NGOs. No country has a plug-in solution. It's a concern of everybody, youngsters, families, communities, and government. The pathway to addiction is a complex one, whether it is alcohol, tobacco, or illicit drugs. It includes the biological, the genetic components like personality traits, cultural and social norms. In medical terms, addiction is a disease, what we call it, based on a biopsychosocial model. Besides, the other determinants of addictions are availability and demand of drugs. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honorable Bull Béranger started his intervention on this bill saying, I quote, "Ce n'est pas la légalisation du ganja." Of course, it was never on the agenda. Honorable Béranger made reference to Germany. The introduction of recreational cannabis is yet to be approved by the German government, and that also the European Union would need to give its green light. Honorable Leader of Opposition stated that in Mauritius there are some 55,000 drug users, out of which 6,600 are people who inject drugs. His proposal is to introduce recreational cannabis as a measure to combat the drug situation. This is only one way of looking at it. I have a few questions to those who have proposed recreational cannabis at this point of time. What impact recreational cannabis will have on youngsters who are occasional smokers or alcohol drinkers? What impact recreational cannabis will have on regular smokers? The NCD survey this year was published did show that between 24 to 34 years old, 50% of this age group are smokers. This is already a challenge, not only for government, but also for the whole nation to overcome. Can we forecast the outcome of NCD survey after 5 years if we introduce recreational cannabis? We are all aware what happy hour is. With the leader of opposition proposing introduction of recreational cannabis.
If you read my speech, I did say that this is something that the Assises de la toxicomanie should look into. That is all I said. The minister, if he looks at my speech again, he will correct what he's saying, because the Honorable Vice Prime Minister was quite right when she quoted me, and I didn't stop her. This I did not say.
Mr. Speaker, sir, can we know what will happen during happy hours if we introduce recreational cannabis? It is said that consumption of cannabis is very often the gateway that leads to hard drugs. Is this what is going to reflect if we consider l'île Maurice c'est un plaisir? Mr. Speaker, sir, those who advocate the use of recreational cannabis in our country should publicly give their opinion on these questions. And what is the point of comparing the German society to the Mauritian society? At this point of time, I personally don't have the answers for all these questions. And if we do have, obviously, it will be divergent. Members of the opposition also stated that this bill is too late. Let me remind the House that UNODC advocated the use of medicinal cannabis in December 2020. Government set up the technical committee in February 2021, even when the focus of government was on COVID-19. And since December 2020 till now, in some 20 months or so, this government has worked relentlessly, managing the COVID, managing the economy through wage assistance schemes, through self-employed assistance schemes, to the tune of billions of rupees to protect and safeguard the employment. I have to point out that views of the public, including those of the opposition, have been sought to comment and give suggestions upon the recommendations of the technical committee. Yet, in spite of these obstacles and time-taking processes, we have come up with such a piece of legislation, a legislation which was long due according to Honorable Eshan Juman. What long overdue. The leader of the opposition came up with the idea of les assises de la drogue. Let me remind him. In the year 2006, when the Labour PMSD government introduced methadone substitution and the needle exchange program in Mauritius, the objective was to reduce harm. Why was harm reduction a priority? It was to decrease HIV transmission and other diseases among people who inject drugs. And after the recommendation of the UNODC, in 2006, this drug situation in Mauritius at that time was also inquiétant. Why did Honorable Duval not come up with les assises de la drogue at that time? Because rightly so, your government followed the international best practices. Till 2014, the idea of les assises de la drogue did not come up from the opposition. Do I have to remind the honorable member of drug situation between 2010 and 2014? Was it not important at that time to have an overview of the drug situation? Mr. Speaker, sir, it's only under the leadership of late Sir Anero Jugnot and that the government came up with the Commission of Inquiry on Drug Trafficking. We are not talking about assises. but we are talking about an empowered and independent commission of inquiry, chaired by an ex-judge, which has vast terms of reference, which worked tirelessly during more than 2 years, auditioning a number of people before publishing a report of 460 recommendations, out of which 80% have already been implemented under this government. According to me, the Commission of Inquiry on Drug Trafficking is much more impactful than a mere series, which are mere consultations. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the debates on this bill, most of the comments concerned the introduction of medicinal cannabis for specific therapeutic conditions and the setting up of the Drug Users Administrative Panel. I will start with the comments from MPs concerning the introduction of medicinal cannabis in Mauritius. Honorable Juman made a point, I should say, that suppliers of medicinal cannabis should not be bijouterie, quincaillerie, hotel owners, but he missed out to include that suppliers of medicinal cannabis should not be people who have been condemned by court for bribery. Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, sir, if a supplier of medicinal cannabis has a track record of bribery to the police officer, and the same person will come up and criticize the police? Honorable Juman, I too am afraid of this. Mr. Speaker, sir, importation of medical cannabis will be under the responsibility of the procurement department of my ministry. The import procedure of medicinal cannabis will be similar to other Schedule II items like morphine, petidine, and fentanyl, and Schedule III drugs like diazepam, alprazolam, which are being imported and used in health institutions. The Honorable Leader of Opposition stated that medicinal cannabis should be available on prescription in pharmacies. I hope the Leader of Opposition knows the situation right now concerning dangerous drugs. Let's take, for example, Xanax is a dangerous drug. To prescribe Xanax, the medical practitioner, I'm serious. To prescribe Xanax, the medical practitioner must have a special prescription pad controlled by the Ministry of Health. And for these medications, there are many counterfeit prescriptions. Cases been referred to LADSU and police, which I'm sure the honorable member is aware of, especially when there is a shortage of these drugs. Now, at this stage, do we make these medicinal cannabis available in pharmacies? And what will happen after a few months if we lose control over its dispensing? It's important at this stage to have proper administrative procedure for medicinal cannabis. Honorable Boulel suggested that the control of medicinal cannabis should be rigorous, and further stated that there is no need to go on a round trip for medicinal cannabis to be dispensed. It's not a question of going round a trip before medicinal cannabis is being dispensed. Only authorized specialists will prescribe medicinal cannabis after the approval of the Medicinal Cannabis Therapeutic Committee. It will be dispensed only by authorized pharmacists in regional hospitals under strict conditions for safety and control purposes. I should here highlight the fact that cannabis and cannabis resin are listed in the Schedule I, that is the schedule listing drugs which do not have therapeutic benefits and which are not authorized to be imported except for medical research and educational purpose. Under the Part 1 of the Principal Act, cannabis and Gandia means bhang, babzi, CD, and all the parts of the plant known as cannabis sativa or cannabis indica, but doesn't include hashish. It's important to say hashish because today it is the talk of the town. hashish, charas, and chiras. What is hashish? Hashish, charas, or chiras means the resin obtained from the cannabis plant. And that hashish, charas, or chiras are the resin of the cannabis plant which are not authorized to be imported as provided under Part 1 of the Principal Act. During his intervention of this bill, Honorable Reza Outim pointed out CBD, that is cannabidiol, was not part of the definition of medicinal cannabis in the Dangerous Drug Act. The reason why tetrahydrocannabidiol, or THC, is included in the definition and not cannabidiol or CBD is that THC is an intoxicating and addictive component of cannabis, while CBD is not. So thus, the intention was to limit the proportion of the ingredient which has harmful effects and may affect the safety of patients if not properly controlled. Nevertheless, there will be, for the sake of bringing clarity, an amendment to the definition of Section 2, that is interpretation of the Principal Act at committee stage, so that the definition of medicinal cannabis would read as follows. Medicinal cannabis means a product which is produced from cannabis plant and contains one or more cannabis-based ingredients and presented as a capsule, an oil-based solution or suspension, or an oromucosal spray having a concentration of not more than 30 milligrams of CBD per milliliters per unit dose and a total volume of not more than 60 milliliters. So it is to be pointed out that product which is produced from cannabis include CBD and hundreds of ingredients. But for the sake of clarity, we have amended at committee stage clause 3b. Honorable Arvind Boulel stated that therapeutic benefits of medicinal cannabis in the form of cannabis oil have been proven on 15 pathologies and asks why we are restricting ourselves to 4 different pathologies. As we get more evidence of the safety and efficacy of medicinal cannabis, accordingly, other pathologies may be included in the list of indications for treatment with medicinal cannabis. Mr. Speaker, sir, the point raised by Honorable Boulel and Honorable Juval has been taken into account in order to allow for more pathologies to be added after proven scientific research. Amendments will be made at committee stage. We will amend Part 2A, medicinal cannabis, at Section 28A in the interpretation section and insert Part B, which will read as follows. Specific therapeutic conditions include such other therapeutic conditions as may be authorized by the Medicinal Cannabis Therapeutic Committee based on therapeutic evidence. Medicinal cannabis will be listed in the Schedule 2 of the Dangerous Drug Act. The list comprises of a list of drugs such as methadone, morphine, petidine, and fentanyl used to treat moderate to severe pain, but may be substances of abuse and high addiction. These items are therefore under more stringent control. They are prescribed for a period not exceeding 14 days under the new amendment brought under this bill. These medications are mainly used for cancer patients or those under palliative care. Let me also add the items of Schedule 3 of the DDA, such as diazepam, alprazolam, are used in certain mental disorders and are prescribed for a period not exceeding 30 days. These items have lesser degree of addiction compared to Schedule 2 items. Honorable Boulel wanted to know from which countries or laboratories the medicinal cannabis would be imported, and also on the storage of the medicinal cannabis. I would like to draw the attention of the House that only preparations approved by the FDA, the Food and Drug Agency of the USA, or the EMA, the European Medicine Agency, will be procured by the ministry from licensed manufacturers, and obviously the storage will be all under the directives of the pharmacy. Honorable Juman stated that there is the need for a clearer definition of Section 28K and 28L of the bill, having to do with patients coming from abroad. Mr. Speaker, sir, any person entering Mauritius, irrespective of them being tourists, local residents, or foreigners residing in Mauritius, receive controlled medication as per the Dangerous Drug Act. A person needs written authorization from the pharmacy department of my ministry prior to any release at the customs department. All medications should be duly covered by a prescription from the treating doctor. This is already a procedure in place for foreigners, local residents who are coming to Mauritius with Schedule 2 drugs. Honorable Karen Fukun Basha talked about the risk of having different decisions from different medicinal cannabis therapeutic committees for patients suffering the same conditions. She also suggested that an electronic register be used for recording purposes. There will be a communication and coordination between the different regional medicinal cannabis therapeutic committees, which will be overseen by the Director of Curative Services of my ministry. To answer to the second part of her question, the Register of Medicinal Cannabis may be both electronic and manual in the manner as approved by the Permanent Secretary of my ministry. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me now come up to the second major amendment proposed to the Dangerous Drug Act, that is the setting up of the DUAP, the Drug Users Administrative Panel. According to Honorable Paul Béranger, the DUAP is nothing new since Section 34A of the DDA already provides for such treatment as education, aftercare, rehabilitation, or social reintegration. Let me explain, Mr. Speaker, sir. According to Sections 34A of the Dangerous Drugs Act, the court shall, where it considers this to be inappropriate, explain to the convicted person that if he undertakes to cooperate in order to be cured of his addiction, the court, instead of sentencing him to imprisonment, may order him to undergo at such institution as may be prescribed, and for such period not exceeding 3 years, as the court may determine. The court may determine such treatment, education, aftercare, rehab, or social integration as the court thinks appropriate. Mr. Speaker, sir, Section 34A of the DDA deals with a person who has already been prosecuted, and if found guilty may be subject to imprisonment, fine, or rehabilitation. However, the conviction for possession of drugs makes him liable to not obtaining a clean certificate of character. Section 34A is about post-trial diversion from criminal system, but while we are introducing is pre-trial diversion from the criminal system. And this, Mr. Speaker, sir, makes the difference. Honorable Béranger wanted to know why the DUAP will sit in 2 divisions. The reason is purely practical, Mr. Speaker, sir, so that to ensure that the DUAP is able to cope with the number of patients and to ensure its operations all around the year. The aim is to fast-track the rehabilitation of patients. Honorable Béranger and Honorable Outim stated that there is a risk of corruption and over-politicization. He also questioned that procedures whereby the DPP has to submit his recommendations to the police, who in turn will refer not the drug users to the DUAP. I would like here to point out that the DPP has full power and discretion over his decisions as conferred to him by the Constitution already canvassed by the Honorable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honorable Paul Béranger asks about the protocol which would be put in place to direct drug users to public or private health institutions. Discussions at the level of my ministry have been ongoing since the last 2 years to prepare for the DUAP. Some patients will be referred by the DUAP to public health institutions and some to private institutions, depending on the nature of the rehabilitation as recommended by the panel. Honorable Leader of Opposition stated that only 50 beds are available for 50 Mr. Speaker, sir, someone who is suffering from an addiction, be it alcohol, be it drugs, be it tobacco, has to be listened to in the first instance. We have to engage him in a therapeutic alliance through empathy, compassion, and collaboration. It's not that someone referred to DUAP will be admitted automatically. This would lead to total failure. Time should be given to the person to build up confidence and motivation to quit drugs. And it is not what Honorable Member is saying that only beds will cure addiction. Coming to the comments made by Honorable Omir about hair tests. Tests also will not cure addiction. Honorable Member was worried about how hair tests can be performed on bald people like me, like my colleague friend Sudesh as well. Honestly, I have no idea. I respect the Honorable Member for his broader exposure on bodily hairs. Mr. Speaker, sir, there is a long list of intervention for treatment of addiction, and I agree that in the years to come, we will have to put extra resources, psychologists, social workers, and NGOs to be able to respond. Honorable Isanjuman wanted to know how many days it would take before a drug user arrested with possession of drugs for personal consumption starts being treated, and what kind of drug users will be referred to rehabilitation, and whether the drug users will be in residential or daycare. As per protocol, we have defined the drug user will first be assessed by the DUAP and referred to rehab center, where the patient will be assessed again to determine the type of rehabilitation treatment to be offered, depending on the condition of the drug user and the type of drug. In residential treatment centers, different drug regimes and a range of psychosocial therapies using a holistic approach will be offered to patients. Community-based centers also offer a range of therapies, including family therapy, education and counseling, group therapies, cognitive behavior therapies, occupational, art, music, relaxation, exercises, yoga classes, and gardening, just to name a few. Honorable Boulel finds that the DUAP is focused on law enforcement, not at all. The main mission of the DUAP is rehabilitation. I will remind the House that the panel shall comprise of a retired government, medical practitioners, social workers, all with solid backgrounds in drug addiction, so that to advise the chairman of the panel on the type of rehabilitation needed on a case-to-case basis. Furthermore, constant training of staff of all grades, including psychiatrists, psychologists, general practitioners, nursing officers, healthcare assistants, and other paramedical staff is ongoing. And as and when required, NGOs can also benefit from training. Capacity building is tantamount to a high degree of service delivery. In short, the patient referred to the DUAP for rehabilitation will have access to professional care. Honorable Arvind Bulel wanted to know if rehabilitation centers, both of the Ministry of Health and Wellness and of NGOs, are currently operating up to the international standards. Yes, presently there are 5 residential rehabilitation centers, 2 for males, Mayberg Rehabilitation Center and Saint Nénuphar in Long Mountain, which caters for persons aged less than 23 years old. 2 more rehabilitation centers at Bransecor Mental Health Care Center in Beaubassin, that is Frangipane for male and Orchidée for female, and a 6th one for adult male will be open in Bransecor next year. All these centers offer a range of rehabilitation of international standard complying with WHO and UNODC guidelines. In addition, concerning community-based rehabilitation, we have also 5 methadone daycare centers at Sainte-Croix, Cassis, and Maillebourg, 2 at Bransecor Mental Health Care Center, male and female, and 5 addiction treatment centers in each regional hospital. I'd like to point out that we have a long history of working collaboration with NGOs for more than 15 years. Honorable Juman asks, what will happen to tourists who are found in possession of drugs for their personal consumption? Again, the Prime Minister, the Honorable Prime Minister, has already given the reply to this, that is, existing procedures will continue to apply to them. He said that as regards to suspension of prosecution, nothing is mentioned about a drug trafficker who is also a drug consumer who has been arrested for personal drug consumption. Drug traffickers will be channeled through the criminal justice system, as is the case presently. DPP is the sole authority to decide as the case may be. Honorable Juman talked about possibilities of relapses among drug users sent to rehab. In case of relapses, drug user will be reassessed and offered treatment as indicated. Mr. Speaker, sir, addiction is a disease, is a chronic relapsing brain disease. So obviously, in case of relapse, they will be again sent to DUAP. Honorable Utim and Honorable Buddha talk about the powers given to the police and about the storage and sampling of drugs by FSL. To encourage the police to carry out on the fight against drug trafficking, amendments are being brought to the Dangerous Drug Act. It will allow the anti-drug smuggling unit to focus on the drug traffickers and dealers, while the DOP will be dealing with drug users who fall prey to these marchands de la mort. Another important feature of this bill is to empower forensic science lab to conduct analysis on sample of drugs seized rather than analyzing all the drugs seized, as is the case of several other jurisdictions. Mr. Speaker, sir, to conclude, the amendments that are being brought to the Dangerous Drug Act are in line with the recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry on Drug Trafficking, which was chaired by ex-Judge Paul Lam-Chandlin in 2018. Under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Pravin Kumar Jagnat, amendments have been brought to increase the threshold of fines and imprisonment for drug traffickers, and at the same time adopt a more human approach towards the victims of drug abuse, offering them a pathway to a proper encadrement via the DUAP. Drug users who use drugs for personal consumption will be dealt with as patients instead of offenders, and this in itself is a paradigm shift. I would like to thank the Attorney General's Office for the valuable contribution in drafting this historical piece of legislation. I would also like to thank the Prime Minister's Office, all the members of the Technical Committee on Medicinal Cannabis, as well as the Steering Committee and the Harm Reduction Section, who have worked relentlessly to bring this bill to this House today. Credit also to the Police Department, the Forensic Science Laboratory, the Office of the DPP, the Ministry of Social Integration, Social Security and National Solidarity, the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family Welfare, as well as all the NGOs for their contribution. With this, Mr. Speaker, sir, I thank you for your attention. I commend the bill to the House.
Seconded. The question is that the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Bill number 15 of 2022 be read a second time. Those in favor say aye, those against say no. Aye. The ayes have it.
Public Bills Committee stage.
Please be seated.
Clause 1, Clause 1 show title, Clause 2 interpretation.
The question that clauses 1 and 2 stand part of the bill. Those favor say aye, those against say no. Aye. Ayes have it.
Clause 3, Section 2 of Principal Act amended.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move for an amendment to Clause 3 as per amendment circulated.
Question is that clause 3 be amended as per amendment circulated. Those in favor say aye, those against say no. Ayes have it. Question is that clause 3 as amended stands part of the bill. Those in favor say aye, those against no. The ayes have it.
Clause 4, new Section 2A inserted in Principal Act. Clause 5, Section 8 of Principal Act amended. Clause 6, Section 18 of Principal Act amended.
Question that clauses 4 to 6 stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye, those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 7, new Part 2A inserted in Principal Act.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move for an amendment to Clause 7 as per amendment circulated.
The question is that clause 7 be amended as per amendment circulated. In favor say aye, those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that clause 7 as amended stands part of the bill. Those in favor say aye, those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 8, Section 29 of Principal Act amended. Clause 9, Section 30 of Principal Act amended. Clause 10, Section 34 Principal Act amended. Clause 11, Section 35 of Principal Act amended. Clause 12, new Section 39A inserted in Principal Act. Clause 13, Section 41 of Principal Act amended. Clause 14, Section 42 of Principal Act amended. Clause 15, Section 54 of Principal Act amended. Clause 16, Section 55 of Principal Act amended. Clause 17, new Section 57A inserted in Principal Act. Clause 18, Section 58 of Principal Act amended. Clause 19, new Section 58A inserted in Principal Act. Clause 20, Section 59 of Principal Act amended.
The question that clauses 8 to 20 stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye, those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 21, new
Mr. Speaker,
Part
sir.
3A inserted in Principal Act.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move for an amendment to Clause 21 as per amendments circulated.
The question is that clause 21 be amended as per amendment circulated. Those in favor say aye, those against say no. The ayes have it. The question is that clause 21 as amended stands part of the bill. Those in favor say aye, those against say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 22, Section 60 of Principal Act amended. Clause 23, first schedule to Principal Act amended. Clause 24, second schedule to Principal Act amended. Clause 25, consequential amendment. Clause 26, commencement.
The question that clauses 22 to 26 stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye, those against say no. The ayes have it.
The title and enacting clause.
The question is the title and enacting clause stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye, those against say no. The ayes have it. Final question is that I do report to the House that the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Bill number 15 of 2022 has passed the committee stage with amendment. Those in favor say aye, those against say no. The ayes have it. Please be seated. Honourable members, I have to report to the House that the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Bill number 15 of 2022 has passed the committee stage with amendments.
Public Bills third reading.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Bill number 15 of 2022 be read the third time and passed.
Is it seconded? The question is that the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Bill number 15 of 2022 be read the third time and passed. Those in favor say aye, those against say no. The ayes have it.
Bill second reading.
Honorable Bola.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I move that the Mauritius Standards Bureau Amendment Bill number 16 of 2022 be read a second time. I am ordered today to present to the House the Mauritius Standards Bureau Amendment Bill, which will bring the country to new pedestals in the fields of standardization and conformity assessment by empowering the Mauritius Standards Bureau, that is MSB, to respond to new industry trends and trade-related issues. The MSB was created as far back as 1975 as a department of the then ministry responsible for the subject of industry. The objective was to provide institutional support to the nascent import substitution industry and export-oriented enterprises at that time, with the aim to improve the quality of their products through standardization and conformity assessment. In this perspective, the MSB was restructured by adopting a horizontal approach to standardization and conformity assessment. Accordingly, standards developing activities, laboratory testing, calibration, and certification activities were segregated under separate units. Mr. Speaker, sir, as part of its journey to gain greater autonomy for enhanced operational flexibility, the MSB was subsequently established as a body corporate under the MSB Act 1993, and it now operates under the aegis of the Industrial Development Division of my ministry. It is mandated to develop standards and provide conformity assessment services such as testing, calibration, certification of products, and management systems. The Bureau is also the custodian of national measurement standards for mass, length, force, temperature, pressure, and electricity. Special efforts were also made to build its institutional capacity and capability. On that score, massive investment was made to acquire sophisticated, state-of-the-art testing equipment. Alongside, new skills were developed, such as auditing skills for evaluating management systems, skills in non-destructive testing, and skills in testing based on internationally accepted standards. The Bureau gained its first accreditation for its certification services from the Dutch Council of Accreditation in 1996. The MSB has since been accredited for its certification, calibration, and testing services by the Mauritius Accreditation Service, that is Mauritas, which has obtained its international recognition from the International Laboratory Accreditation Corporation and the International Accreditation Forum. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Bureau also recognized the importance of international and regional standardization in facilitating trade and responded by networking with international and regional standard bodies. It is to be reckoned that the MSB is a member solely representing Mauritius to the International Organization for Standardization, ISO, since 1995. And by virtue of this permanent membership, the Bureau participates actively in several ISO technical committees for the development of ISO standards. It is also an affiliate member of the International Electrotechnical Commission, which is the organization responsible to prepare and publish international standards for all electrical and electronic-related technologies. Furthermore, the MSB became an associate member of the Bureau International des Poids et de Mesures in 2010, which allows it to have a traceable and scientifically based measurement system, an efficient and effective standards development process, and a modern conformity assessment structure. The MSB has also signed several memoranda of understanding with countries such as Ghana, India, Kenya, Madagascar, Mozambique, Pakistan, Rwanda, Seychelles, South Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, and Zambia to establish cooperation in the fields of standards development, conformity assessment, accreditation, and information exchange. Mr. Speaker, sir, at the regional level, the MSB participates actively in the harmonization of standards at the level of the Southern African Developing Community, SADC, Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, and the African Organization for Standardization, ARSU. Allow me to inform the House that the MSB is a founding member of the African Organization for Standardization, ARSU, since 1977. The various committees to which the Bureau is a member relate particularly to the COMESA committees on standardization and quality assurance, SADC cooperation in standardization, as well as ARSU technical harmonization committees. I wish to highlight that the MSB, through its participation in these committees, has been instrumental in enhancing intra-African trade, particularly by removing various obstacles in the form of technical barriers to trade. The MSB will support further our regional integration strategy, particularly in the context of the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA. The AFCFTA represents a huge market of 1.2 billion people with a combined gross domestic product of $2.5 trillion and aims at accelerating intra-African trade, ultimately boosting Africa's trading position in the global market. It is to be noted that in order to benefit fully from the trade opportunities arising within the context of the African Continental Free Trade Area, the member states of the African Union need to harmonize with ARSU standards. The MSB, through its affiliation to ARSU, undoubtedly assists our economic operators to further penetrate the African market by leveraging on the vast opportunities devolving from the EFCFTA. Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to apprise members of the House and the population at large of the preponderant dimension that standards have in our daily lives. A standard is meant to be a level of acceptable quality or achievement covering a wide spectrum of activities such as managing a process, delivering a service, or supplying products. Consequently, standards provide the technical basis for trade and a means of facilitating compliance with technical regulations. As you may be aware, standards are usually developed through a transparent, open, and consensus-based process by involving relevant stakeholders. In the case of products, it ensures fitness for purpose while guaranteeing good practice in respect of processes and services. Standards also assist organizations in the development of their management systems. The number of national standards developed is often used as a yardstick to measure the level of quality achieved. In the words of the United Nations Industrial Development Organizations, UNIDO, and I quote, "The widespread use of standards is a necessary precursor to the evolution of a culture of quality in society," end of quote. Having enlightened the House on the importance of standards, allow me to shed light on another critical functions of the quality infrastructure, namely conformity assessment, which ensures compliance with the requirements of a standard. ISO defines conformity assessment as a demonstration that specified requirements relating to a product, process, system, person, or body are fulfilled. As such, It involves sampling, inspection, testing, and certification as a means of giving assurance that a product, process, system, body, or person does in fact conform to the requirements of the standard. For national application, a national standards body may develop a national standard or may adopt an international standard that has been developed by international consensus and published by one of the main international standards organizations, ISO, IEC, ITU, Codex Alimentarius Commission, etc. The advantage of this latter route is that when two countries adopt the same international standard, trade between them is simplified. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the past years, the Mauritius Standards Bureau has fulfilled successfully its role of formulating demand-driven standards and promoting internationally recognized conformity assessment services to all sectors of our economy. To date, the Bureau has developed 911 Mauritian standards covering the different fields of activities. The Bureau has certified 95 organizations for various management systems in the fields relating to quality management systems, ISO 9001, information security management, ISO IEC 27001, and food safety management system, HACCP, and ISO 22000. In fact, the MSB is considered as being the pioneer in ISO 9001 quality management system for both the public and private sectors in Mauritius. The MSB has broadened its scope of services by assisting farmers in the adoption of good agricultural practices, GAP, under the new Maurigap scheme. It is comforting to note that 52 farmers have been certified under this scheme. The MSB has also contributed to the promotion of sustainable tourism through certification of tour operators and hotels, in accordance with MS 165, which relates to sustainable tourism. Moreover, the Bureau has developed its capacity to offer testing services for a wide range of products varying from PVC pipes and products, concrete and cement, electric cables for domestic and industrial use, domestic electric appliances, toys to food products such as rice and flour. The MSB has been able to diversify its services through the establishment of free laboratories specialized in humidity, torque, and temperature with the assistance of the European Union under the SADC Trade-Related Facility Project Scheme. The MSB has also contributed positively to trade facilitation. Indeed, in order to facilitate trade and allow importers to remove their products from customs in the shortest time span, the Bureau has set up an office at Customs House for the verification of certificates of conformity and samples for several products, such as plastic pipes and fittings, cement, steel bars for reinforcement of concrete, household electrical appliances and electrical accessories, helmets, gas hoses, gas regulators, and outboard motors as per the relevant regulations in place. I wish to inform members that this positive performance and achievements have enabled MSB to generate sufficient revenue to cover 50% of its total expenditure. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I have just mentioned, over the years, MSB has adapted its operations to the demands of the market by providing services including technical investigations for conformity assessment, metrology, and calibration. This bill, which is being introduced in the National Assembly today, therefore formalizes these activities with a view to creating an institutional framework to establish and implement standardization, including conformity assessment services and metrology. This bill has a laudable objective to to amend the MSB Act 1993 to align the operations of the MSB with international norms and to develop a new strategy to adapt to the dynamism of the industry and trade sectors in the context of the World Trade Organization Technical Barrier to Trade Agreement, to which Mauritius is a signatory. In this context, several amendments are being proposed in this new bill. Allow me to mention that the most important amendment relates to the setting up of a national enquiry point at the MSB, which is stipulated at clause 4 of the bill. Members of the House will appreciate that Mauritius has constantly been at the forefront to bring improvement in the evolving dynamics of standardization. It became a member of the World Trade Organization, WTO, on 1st January 1995, when it also signed the WTO Technical Barriers to Trade Agreement. This agreement aims at ensuring that technical regulations, standards, and conformity assessment procedures are non-discriminatory and do not create unnecessary obstacles to trade. The agreement with WTO requires that each member sets up an enquiry point to reply to all reasonable enquiries from other members and interested parties, as well as to provide the relevant documents regarding trade facilitation. In Mauritius, the national focal point to the WTO is the International Trade Division of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Regional Integration and International Trade, while the MSB is operating as a national enquiry point, as it is an internationally recognized standards body by the International Organization for Standardization. The bill therefore makes the necessary provisions to empower the MSB to operate as a national enquiry point in consultation with other ministries. Clause 23 of the bill relates to the provision of additional services under a new inspection scheme for the verification of locally manufactured products as per the relevant Mauritian standard. This constitutes a prerequisite to facilitate exports in the context of our trade agreements. It should also be noted that the inspection scheme can be used to verify products such as rice and flour imported by the State Trading Corporation. Such a scheme will assess the physical condition as well as the composition of the product in the interest of consumers. Mr. Speaker, sir, over the years, in order to assume fully its role, the MSB has been undertaking activities which were not referred to in the MSB Act of 1993. The MSB has developed its capacity to offer measurement, traceability to SR units, Système International d'Unité, as per the Bureau International des Poids et Mesures Convention. In addition, the Bureau provides calibration facilities to industries such as temperature, humidity, and torque parameters, amongst others. The new bill therefore provides under clause 23 the necessary legal framework for the MSB to offer these important services to industries. I wish to highlight that preliminary discussion will shortly begin between my ministry and relevant stakeholder to come up with proposals to amend the International System of Units, Act 1984, to be aligned with the new international norms set by the Bureau International des Poids et Mesures. It is worth highlighting that the MSB is playing a role of national importance in providing its services to ensure the protection of the population in terms of its access to quality staple food commodities such as rice and flour. Furthermore, it has also played a crucial part in ensuring the safety of our population through the provision of testing services for construction material such as cement and steel bars. The overarching issue of consumer protection has always been high on the agenda of the MSB. In this perspective, the bill confirms the status of the MSB as a government agency responsible for verifying the certificate of conformity and or testing the different types of products as per the following regulations. 1. Plastic and polyethylene pipes and fittings, Mauritius Standard Specifications Amendment Regulation 2019. 2. Consumer Protection Safety Requirements Regulations, 2019. 3. Steel bars, steel wires, and steel fabrics, Motion Standard Specification Regulations, 2020. 4. Energy Efficiency Labeling of Regulated Machinery Regulations, 2017. 5. Environment Protection, Banning of Plastic Bags Regulations, 2020. 6. Toys Safety Amendment Regulations, 2019. 7. Consumer Protection Control of Imports Regulations, 2017. 8. Hot dip galvanized articles, Motion Standard Specifications Regulations, 1989. 9. Fair Trade Act, Firecrackers. 10. Excise Act, Excise Regulations. And 11. Consumer Control of Imports Regulations, 2022. Mr. Speaker, sir, I deem it important to shed light on one of the main functions of the Mauritius Food Standards Agency, MFSA, which has been constituted under the MFSA Act 2022. This Act is empowering the MFSA to develop standards for food items. In this connection, in Clause 6 of the MSB Amendment Bill 2022, that is this bill, a new section 4A1B is inter alia being added for the MSB to adopt a motion standard, any standard or any other publication or research work established by any other institution in Mauritius or abroad in relation to any goods, article, process, system, or service. In addition, Clause 4 of the MSB Amendment Bill 2022 provides for a new subsection 3 to the effect that subject to any other enactment, the Bureau shall, for the purposes of this Act, be the national standards body and the government agency for conformity assessment services. My ministry has discussed with the Ministry of Health and Wellness on this issue. Therefore, an appropriate mechanism will be put in place whereby the MFSA will develop standards for food items in consultation with the MSB, which will then be adopted by the latter, that is, the Mauritius Standards Bureau. Mr. Speaker, sir, we operate in a world where change is constant and where challenges and disruptions can be global in scale. To be well positioned within this global context, the Mauritius Standards Bureau must have a clear and agile strategy that defines its purpose and what the Bureau wants to achieve, whilst allowing the Bureau to anticipate change and adapt quickly to the world around us. The MSB has come a long way in its nearly 50-year history and contributed to the socio-economic progress of the country. We have to recognize that today's world is not the same as yesterday's, nor will it be the same as tomorrow's. We need to take bold measures if we want to ensure that our National Mauritius Standards Bureau continues to be at the forefront of positive change. With this in mind, I have come up with this new Mauritius Standards Bureau Amendment Bill. I am confident that this piece of legislation will allow the Bureau to successfully align its purpose and objectives for a resilient, prosperous, and sustainable Mauritius, riding on the crest of inclusive and equitable economic growth. With these words, I now commend the bill to the House. Thank you.
Honourable members, I'll suspend the sitting for 1 hour.